Welcome into another episode of Locked On Phillies. And in today's episode, we discuss where Alec Bohm is mentally heading into the season after an offseason where reports said he was almost headed out of Philadelphia. Where's he at? Well, we'll discuss on today's episode.
You are Locked On Phillies, your daily Philadelphia Phillies podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Yes, this is Locked On Phillies. I'm your host, Connor Thomas. Thank you so much for joining us today. We come to you as part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. You may know me from some of my other work in the sports talk space. I've been on air over at 97.5 The Fanatic doing sports talk radio here in Philadelphia for 5 years now. I've been a credentialed Philadelphia Phillies media member for the last 3 seasons, and this is my 4th year as the host of Locked On Phillies. Please make sure that you're rating and reviewing if you're listening to this in podcast form. We're available wherever you get your podcasts. If you're watching this on our YouTube channel and haven't hit that subscribe button yet, make sure you do that. It will get you notifications when new episodes are posted when you subscribe to the Locked On Phillies YouTube channel. It's free. It's easy. You won't miss any of the big news that we're going to have throughout the season. And also, it really helps us out here on Locked On Phillies. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Right now, new FanDuel customers can get $150 in bonus bets if your first $5 bet wins. Download the app or head to FanDuel.com to get started. Now, this is something that we've talked about throughout the offseason. It's going to be a conversation throughout the year, but I wanted to take the first look at it now because Alec Bohm is down in Clearwater. He is with most of the rest of the team. The position players still don't technically report till tomorrow to camp, or rather, they're not required to report till tomorrow. But Bohm's down there, and he's had a tumultuous offseason. So we're going to get into where he's at mentally with all of the trade rumors that went on. We're also going to talk about Kyle Schwarber potential extension. We talked about a JT Realmuto one in our last episode. Well, Schwarber's another guy in the final year of his deal. And an interesting little Edmundo Sosa storyline that has popped up, which could be something that we did not think about as far as balancing out the outfield play. Yeah, the outfield, right. But we'll talk about Alec Bohm first because this is a sticky situation, right? The reason that there was this discourse about Alec Bohm, you got to go back a ways. Let's go back to last year. He was good throughout the regular season. Actually, let's go back to 2 years ago in 2023. A strong regular season from Alec Bohm that led to a postseason where he didn't really perform. He was one of the more clutch hitters in baseball in the regular season. Then in the postseason, the team still had success. They made it to the NLCS, but he was really a non-factor for most of the way. Then in 2024, you see that path happening again. And 1 year is an anomaly. 2 years is a trend. He didn't play a huge part of the conversation when it came to the 2022 team as well. But he was a young player on that team. But it's just like he hasn't really had his postseason moment. His biggest one was, I guess, in the first game of the 2022 postseason where he was hit by a pitch against the Cardinals in the 9th inning to kind of jumpstart that rally that ended up pushing them on a World Series run path. It was crazy there, but it was him getting hit. So it's not like he really did something at the plate like that. But bottom line is he's had 3 years in a row of regular season success and postseason irrelevancy is the best way I know how to put it. He just hasn't been a factor. And then this past year, you also look at it and you say, okay, throughout the season, there were kind of these whispers here and there. It wasn't really anything crazy because the Phillies were winning a lot of baseball games. But when he would go through slumps, his teammates and his coaches kind of realize, okay, this is a guy that mentally gets very down on himself. Too much so. He carries the bats into the next at bat. That's not something you can do. You have to have a short memory as a professional baseball player. You're going to get out 7, maybe 8 out of 10 times, depending on how well you're playing at any given stretch of the season. If you're carrying that over, it's going to compound. You're going to have a really tough time getting out of tough stretches. And it also can bring the rest of your teammates down, or it could just be a bad look for you in general. So when you look at that, you say, okay, he's got a little bit of mental fragility. He is still a young-ish player, even though he's been up with the Phillies for a while. He may still have some growing up to do, but he probably should be further along than this. And then he gets sat in the second game of the postseason run, or the postseason series against the Mets. Wasn't much of a run as an all-star starter that year. And that was weird. And that's where the alarm bells first started going off. Like, what in the world's going on with Alec Bohm? Is it a panic move by Rob Thompson? Is Alec Bohm having some internal stuff that we're not totally privy to when it comes out after? Yeah, that was based on really the mentality that he had shown, or the lack of mentality that he had shown, to fight out of tough spots. And they need to make sure that they had the right guys in the lineup, and guys that were not going to carry over yesterday's failure to affect today's potential success. And then what that bled into this offseason was all this conversation about, wow, well, the Phillies, they're shopping Bohm, which the Phillies have denied, but a lot of reports were out there where they were initiating trade conversations. We know that whether they initiated them or not, trade conversations took place. Alec Bohm was on the chopping block this offseason, and the Phillies never found value for Alec Bohm that would even out what his value to the organization is. You're not going to trade a guy if you're not going to get the proper amount back for him. So now, as we sit here the day before position players are required to report to camp, Alec Bohm is still a member of the Phillies. He will be a member of the Phillies this year. He's not moving, right? And the Phillies can say whatever they want about, we never wanted to trade him, whatever. Fact of the matter is, those conversations happened because of his mentality. So that leads us to what's important for right now. You took a player that has had multiple years of regular season success with postseason struggle, and that has led to some mental fragility. Or maybe he's had that mental fragility, but that has been reacted to by the player as a little bit of like mental weakness, a little bit of over emotion, right? And I'm not trying to completely psychologically dissect Alec Bohm or say, this guy has no mental makeup, he can't win. Very talented Major League Baseball player, like very good player, good locker room guy as well. Like, he's not fighting with his teammates, he's more fighting with himself. And that just affects his performance. But if the team isn't all pulling in the same direction, if he's not playing at his best, it makes it significantly harder for the other guys to accomplish what they're going to do. So now you take that guy that was having a little bit of struggles with his mentality, and you tell him all offseason, hey, you might get traded. And then he comes back to this organization. Think about all the stuff that could be going through his head. They don't want me. They don't want me here. They don't think I'm good enough. Am I good enough? Do you start doubting yourself if you're that player? Do you doubt your teammates? Do you doubt your organization, your manager? Like, there's so many things that could be going through Alec Bohm's head. And it's definitely going to be a storyline to watch this season. Now, the good news is the early reports from spring training. I've read a couple articles on this, quotes from Alec Bohm, stuff he said in the locker room. The early news from spring training makes it sound like Alec Bohm is not only at peace with where the Philadelphia Phillies handled talks this year or this offseason, but he's in a better, more improved spot. Now, that's easy to say February 16th in Clearwater, Florida, when the sun's shining on you and you haven't played a regular game yet and there's no pressure, right? But Rob Thompson said that Alec Bohm seems like he's in a better spot mentally, which is surprising to me considering this was a tough offseason mentally for him, I'm sure. Some of the teammates were like, yeah, he's in a good spot. We're happy he's still here. Brandon Marsh was one of the outspoken ones who they're close. They live together. Like, we know the Brandon Marsh, Alec Bohm, like, dynamic. They're boys. They're tight. But there's a lot of faith in Alec Bohm, it sounds like, from the players and Rob Thompson and the organization. Now, they did want to move him, so there's not 100% faith, but there are two ways you can go here. You can either mentally collapse and fight this whole me against the world mentality, and the first time you face adversity, you're going to see him majorly collapse, or this forces you to face the reality that you might need to do a little bit of growing up. And that was one of the things that Alec Bohm was talked about already in spring training before he even really gets started in earnest. It's like, maybe I need to do a little bit more growing up like that. And I get that. Listen, whomst among us has not had these moments where we're like, okay, I can't do that anymore. I can't act like that anymore. That's not conducive to my success, whether it's podcasting, whether it's a desk job, whether it's service industry, first responders, everything. Yeah, like in any walk of life, even professional baseball player, there are times where you confront character traits that you have that might not be conducive to your success. So maybe this is exactly what Alec Bohm needed, the come to Jesus moment of, the organization that you just were an all-star starter for, they're trying to trade you this offseason. Whether they say that they initiated it or not, they're entertaining that conversation. It's not because of your skill as a baseball player. It's because of your mentality. So are you going to fix that and become a part of a winning team? Or are you going to mope more and throw away what could be a very promising career here in Philadelphia? Like, there could be a point 3, 4, 5 years down the line that we could never imagine the Philadelphia Phillies ever trading Alec Bohm. But as things stand right now, this season is a hot seat for him. And the great news is where he's at mentally, it sounds like he's not only in a good spot, he's in a better spot as a result. At least that's what people are saying. Now, talk is cheap. Actions are very, very valuable. We'll see in March and April and May when the season gets really rolling, like what this guy has as far as his focus level, as far as his ability to bounce back from tough stretches. There are tough stretches in every baseball season for every baseball player. But as far as where he is mentally right now, the question that we want to start the episode with, it sounds like he's in a very, very good spot. It sounds like he's focused. It sounds like he's ready. It sounds like he's improved. And that's not coming from him. That's coming from Rob Thompson. That's coming from Brandon Marsh. That's coming from other guys around the organization. We'll see if it holds true because he's an important part of this team. I think we forget just how important of a player Alec Bohm is sometimes to this team because of all the trade conversations this offseason. But he's a big piece of what this team can be. And if he's not mentally where he needs to be, that's going to make it very, very hard for the Philadelphia Phillies to reach their goal. So good news so far on the Alec Bohm front. But again, these are very preliminary quotes before anything has gone right or gone wrong. It's very easy to be in a good mental state when you're playing golf half the day down there in Clearwater. So we'll see how it continues to play. But I love what I'm hearing from Phillies spring training on a lot of fronts. And this is just the latest one that should make you feel pretty good about that. Coming up next, we've talked about a JT Realmuto potential extension. Now we're going to talk about one that I think is an absolute no-brainer. Another veteran player that's heading into a contract year, and I think it'd be silly for the Philadelphia Phillies not to bring him back. We'll talk about Kyle Schwarber coming up next as we continue today's episode. Let's talk about FanDuel, though, because when the game tips off, the NBA action is just getting started, and there's no better place to get in on it than FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. With FanDuel, you can place live bets throughout the game, so even if you miss the opening tip-off or you want to bet on a fourth quarter comeback, you can stay in the action. And if you're looking for a bigger payout, you can even combine your live bets into a same-game parlay. I love using FanDuel's live betting. I think it gives you the best chances to win. It also keeps every moment of the game exciting, but you get a feel for the game. It's like, oh, this guy's hot right now. I'm going to go ahead and take his teams over, something like that. Oh, this team, they're down in the scoring, but they're on a run. I might see if that continues. I'll bet on them. There's a lot of chances that you get, and you never feel like you missed your chance because you can keep betting throughout the whole game. Plus, the app's easy to use, and when you win, you get paid instantly. So right now, new FanDuel customers can get $150 in bonus bets if your first $5 bet wins. Just visit FanDuel.com to join today. That's FanDuel.com to join today for your shot at $150 in bonus bets. Make every moment more with FanDuel, the official sports betting partner of the NBA. All right, let's talk about Mr. Schwarber. Kyle Schwarber has been the leader of this team for the past couple of years now. Really, it was a Rhys Hoskins-Kyle Schwarber tandem, and then Rhys Hoskins goes down for the year, and then he goes to Milwaukee, and listen, still love Rhys, big Rhys guy. But in that absence of Rhys Hoskins, Kyle Schwarber really took over as the guy who's like going to be the vocal leader of this team. And he's done a great job of it. He's a great locker room guy. One of the number one things you hear about Kyle Schwarber, like one might be dude mashes home runs. Two is always great teammate, great guy, great locker room dude. And that remains this season. And it's interesting because you can't just like bring back everybody. You can't give lifetime contracts to all of these players and then just never change anything and have a team of 50-year-olds one day down the line. It's not prudent. So you can't just say, I like this player, sign this player. But I'm going to tell you why Kyle Schwarber getting an extension from the Philadelphia Phillies is an absolute no-brainer. First off, the guy has been productive as all get out since becoming a member of the Philadelphia Phillies. Mashing home runs, adding to his game, being a great leadoff hitter, which you might not be asked to do this year, but whatever the case, whatever he's been asked by the Philadelphia Phillies, whether that's in the field or at the designated hitter position, he has done it, and he has done it well. He is one of the premier power hitters in today's baseball game, and he is a great leader to boot. And he's a great walk skidder. He sees the plate well. He's not a big, like, chase a whole bunch of stuff guy. Like, if you could build a modern power hitter, it would probably look like Kyle Schwarber, right? see some pitches so you can keep yourself valued there, but you're not really going to hit for average. Mash baseballs, use the whole field. Like he's great. Now there are better power hitters in the game, guys like Aaron Judge, guys like Juan Soto. But when you look at Kyle Schwarber, he's up there. Shohei Ohtani, of course, needs to be mentioned in that conversation as well. Schwarber is in that conversation just from a power standpoint. Those other guys have more to their game, offensively, defensively, but Schwarber's in that conversation. The problem with Kyle Schwarber, right, like the deficiency, if we're going to use like the Moneyball conversation, like why do people overlook his value? And I don't think many people overlook Kyle Schwarber's value, but like why would they? Because part of why you're giving him an extension would be, hey, we think we could get you at a price that other teams wouldn't pay in free agency, and that's what would make you comfortable, or we might want to bring you back here on a discount, but here's why you're better to be here. There's all these conversations about why Kyle Schwarber should be back with the Philadelphia Phillies from a monetary standpoint. But with the luxury tax, the whole conversation, John Middleton has proven he doesn't care. Dave Dombrowski has proven he doesn't care. If they want a player, they'll go get a player. So last Kyle Schwarber of those guys, and we broke it down to basically like the big three, right? It's Nick Castellanos, who is not in the final year of his deal, but will be going into one, and there have been trade rumors about basically since he got here. JT Realmuto, who's in the final year of his deal, and Kyle Schwarber, who we're talking about, is in the final year of his deal. The guy that makes the most sense is Kyle Schwarber. Nick Castellanos played 162 games in right field last year, but he's not going to do that forever. And he's a guy that's streaky. So let's say the defense drops off even more. He's not a plus defender. He's probably a league average defender, Nick Castellanos. His defense drops off a little bit more. He gets in a cold streak. You can easily have the conversation of like, hey, man, is this guy consistent enough as he continues to age to be a major part of this team? I get that. I still like Nick Castellanos as a baseball player, but that conversation may change depending on what happens this season. JT Realmuto, like him as a baseball player. Had a rough year last year. The decline has seemed to start physically. He plays a very physical position. If he's going to switch positions, well, he's a great defensive catcher, so that takes away some of his value. Offensively, maybe he'll have a bounce back year. Maybe he won't. And like that's just aging. Like it's not JT Realmuto stinks. And to be clear, the Nick Castellanos conversation is the same thing. It's all these aging dependent things, but also the style of baseball that they play. Kyle Schwarber does not have to play the field. Like he's just DHing. And there will be a point where you're going to want to rotate Bryce Harper there, which I think is why really Kyle Schwarber is learning first base with Bobby Dickerson this spring training, because maybe there will be a rotational aspect to the DH first baseman dynamic. It'll be like Schwarber plays first one day, Harper plays first the next 3 days, and then the day that like Harper doesn't play first, he DHs, and then every once in a while you get one of the guys an off day or whatever. But Schwarber is able to just DH, and you don't have to worry about like the breakdown, the wear and tear. He also doesn't swing the same way as Bryce Harper, right? Bryce Harper has this violent approach to mashing baseballs because Bryce Harper is just this physical specimen that is so fine-tuned to the bat plane and everything that he just trusts his hands so much, trusts his body so much. He's like, I can swing out of my shoes, and I know that I'm good enough that I can make good enough contact that I can send this out of the yard. Schwarber is less violent, and the ball goes further because he's just a bigger, stronger man. Like that dude is a tank of a human being, and he's built like a power hitter more so than Bryce Harper. Not like I don't need him to do a push-up competition. Just Kyle Schwarber can easier generate power, which adds longevity to his game. He doesn't have to play the field, which adds longevity to his game. He's a great leader in the clubhouse, more so than guys like JT and Nick Castellanos. And that's not to say they're not leaders. That's to say Kyle Schwarber may be one of, if not the greatest clubhouse guys in Major League Baseball right now. He's an insanely important piece of this team from a clubhouse locker room dynamic. So all of that combines to projectable health. He's still mashing the baseball. He's an important part of this team. He's talented. He's a great leader. He plays a position that you don't have to worry about age affecting as much. That he's the safest bet to get an extension out of those three guys. He is, in my mind, at least. And I think I don't want to see them lose JT Realmuto. I don't. Like, he's also a valuable guy to bring back. And Nick Castellanos, if he goes at some point, he goes. I'm kind of at that point where, like, great player. I love Nick Castellanos. Like, I do. I like all of these guys. I feel strongly about the quality of this team. But I feel like it would be easier to replace a Nick Castellanos than JT Realmuto or Kyle Schwarber. just my personal perspective. And we're splitting hairs because these are three great baseball players. These are three at their best all-star caliber players. But I think it'd be harder to find the leadership and the power that Kyle Schwarber offers for the dollar amount that you're going to pay, because other teams see him as just like this DH that can't play the field. The Phillies see him as this multifaceted weapon that can help at any point in the lineup, doesn't have to take up position in the field, and can be a great locker room guy. JT Realmuto, a valued backstop, is just like, it's an invaluable thing. So I go through all of that to say this. If I had to pick one of those three guys to give an extension to right now today, it would be Kyle Schwarber. I would not think twice. I would not feel bad about it. I would never have a second thought. I don't know if it works out or not, but that is by far and away the safest bet. And it sounds like Kyle Schwarber and the Phillies have mutual interest on that, just like they do with JT Realmuto. Now, I know there's people screaming at the laptop screen or the phone screen or the TV screen saying, Connor, you said they're not going to run it back again, and you're telling me that they want to extend all these guys. Not extend all of these guys. And I don't know if these will actually get done. But if it were up to me, Kyle Schwarber would absolutely remain a member of the Philadelphia Phillies, because for all the things that the Phillies do wrong offensively, I think Kyle Schwarber is everything that is right about the modern approach to the game of baseball and hitting wise. Like, I think he's almost the merge of old school power hitting and new school power hitting, creating a player that it's almost hard to argue against in any facet of his offensive game. Some people look at the way that he runs around the bases and thinks, well, this guy can be a liability in certain situations. I look at Kyle Schwarber and I see a guy that works the count, sees the plate, communicates what he's seeing very well, can hit the ball out of the yard, can also use the whole field now after what we saw last year, is a very smart player with how he approaches at bats to always set his teammates up to have the most success behind him. And on top of all of that, a great leader. What more can I say about Kyle Schwarber that should make you want him back as a member of the Philadelphia Phillies? As much as Bryce Harper has like the lifetime deal and Trey Turner has like the lifetime deal, Kyle Schwarber, after what he's done in his time with the Philadelphia Phillies, should probably be put into that camp. And I'm not saying give Kyle Schwarber 10 years, $300 million. I'm saying do what you got to do to keep Kyle Schwarber in-house. Would be my opinion. It's something that we'll look out throughout the year. Maybe they'll get it done before the season starts. Who knows? Maybe they'll get it done during the season. Maybe they won't, and they'll let them test free agency. But if you bring one of these three guys back, I want it to be Schwarber for all the reasons that I just laid out there. But as we continue to try and find these fun, unique ways to shift around what the Philadelphia Phillies have done without changing the roster too much, because as we know, they're bringing back a lot of the same players, there's one we haven't really thought of. And honestly, I'm kind of surprised we haven't thought of it. And it may be a genius move. This may be the smartest thing the Philadelphia Phillies do all year. And I'm going to tell you what it is next as we continue today's episode. All right, so what could I be talking about? What could be the smartest thing that the Philadelphia Phillies do all year? Well, it has to do with Edmundo Sosa. And Edmundo Sosa has been a home run trade acquisition for the Philadelphia Phillies. Like, when Dave Dombrowski leaves this city one day, one of the things he can hang his hat on is that Edmundo Sosa acquisition. To find a player that versatile, that valuable in a depth role, that always plays his role and is a great locker room guy and takes care of business in one of the toughest roles to play, which is not playing every day, but having to show up when needed and be an impact player, like, that's an incredible piece to have. He's been great at third, at short, at second. Wherever the Phillies need him in the infield, Edmundo Sosa has answered the call. Filling in for Trey Turner last year for over a month, he was outstanding. He didn't just fill in for Trey Turner. He equaled Trey Turner's production almost over the course of that stretch. Like, you can't expect that from anybody in a depth role. And yet Edmundo Sosa, he provided it. The guy's had big moments. The guy's shown up in the postseason. I can't say enough good things about Eddie. Like, Edmundo Sosa is one of, if not the most unsung heroes of the Philadelphia Phillies right now. So you have this guy that is a valuable offensive player. He is an insanely good defensive player as well. Like, that's part of the reason the Phillies first acquired him, was like, we don't know if this guy can hit consistently at the major league level, but we know defensively, coming over from the St. Louis Cardinals organization, this is a guy that we really, really like what he could be as a defensive option. And then he shows that he can be a plus major league hitter in small spurts. That's a great thing. So you have a guy with great defensive instincts. He's athletic. He can move around a little bit. He's not all due respect to the guy that I just gave a lot of love to, he's not Kyle Schwarber, where he's not the most mobile person. We'll just put it that way. Edmundo Sosa can move around a little bit. And by a little bit, I mean he can move around a lot. I don't mean to understate that. So what have the Phillies started to do with Edmundo Sosa? I can't believe we didn't put it together yet. They're starting to talk to him a little bit about playing the outfield and starting to work through some of that. Now, I don't know if it's going to be a regular thing. I don't know if they're going to do it this year. It's just a thought process. Remember, we talked in yesterday's episode about Rob Thompson approaching JT Realmuto and saying, yo, you ever think about playing the outfield? I don't think he said it just like that, but that was the gist of what he asked, was like, have you considered outfield? So clearly the Phillies are trying to figure out some way to build up the depth pieces for an outfield that was the worst part of the team last year. Or I guess we'll just call it the least effective part of the team, because they didn't stink, but they weren't good enough for what the Philadelphia Phillies wanted to accomplish at a World Series winning level. They were definitely the sore thumb that stuck out of the 2024 Phillies was the outfield play. They were average at best. The rest of the team was well above average. So now with Max Kepler in left and a Brandon Marsh, Yohan Rojas tandem of some sort in center, and Nick Castellanos in right, and your depth is probably going to be like a Weston Wilson or something, you're trying to find ways to get more proven major league talent in the outfield. And Edmundo Sosa could be that guy. He could be a guy that you see play a little bit of a corner outfield spot at some points this year. And that gets a better bat in the lineup. Think about it. Righty for the lefty Max Kepler. If you have a situation where you have a tough lefty on the mound, Kepler hasn't proven that he's going to be able to hit lefties this year. Now, I'm saying that hypothetically. I don't know exactly what Kepler's going to show against left-handed pitchers this year. We will have to wait and see where he slots in the lineup. But if that is proven, if he's like showing that he can't hit lefties, Edmundo Sosa in left field would not be the worst thing to happen. Like if he could field his position. You don't want a complete liability out there. But another right-handed bat in the outfield could be very, very valuable for the Phillies. And I guess the only question with Edmundo Sosa is, can he play the outfield? And his glove work in the infield would seem to indicate that he has that ability. Like, I don't want to pretend like major league outfield is an easy thing to play. It is not. There is no position at the major league level that's like, I can do this in my sleep. It's professional baseball, guys. But it does seem that the corner outfield spots seem to be the easiest to pick up defensively, right? That would stand to reason considering guys that play them. Kyle Schwarber, Nick Castellanos, guys that are just like not plus defensive players normally find themselves in corner outfield spots. Well, who's to say Edmundo Sosa can't do that? And if you find a depth piece, like imagine, I just want to pull this up real quick for you because I want you to think about this. Like, wipe Edmundo Sosa from your mind right now. Edmundo Sosa doesn't exist, or rather he does exist, but he's the utility infielder for the Philadelphia Phillies, right? That's all he is. You don't even consider him to play outfield. And then the Phillies go out and they sign somebody to play the outfield as a depth role. And this guy, he just had a season where he batted .257, on-base percentage of .313, a slugging percentage of .422. Those aren't crazy numbers. 7 stolen bases, 7 home runs. But he did all of this in 249 at-bats. So as a depth player, you're going to get a guy that hits right around .260. Remember in 2022 with the Philadelphia Phillies, he batted .315 in what did he have here as far as at-bats? It was around 70 at-bats. So, yeah, this is a guy that we'll just say he hits around .260, right? We'll call it that as a member of the Philadelphia Phillies. His actual number for the Philadelphia Phillies as far as batting average, .259. So, yeah, I'm spot on. But let's say you signed a random left fielder as a depth piece, or just like a utility outfielder that batted .260, that had a little bit of pop, that you knew was going to be good locker room fit, that you knew could have like clutch at bats when you needed to, because for some reason you watch this guy's last 3 years of his career. That's basically what you're doing if you move Edmundo Sosa to the outfield. We would be excited about that player. That's essentially what I just described to you is significantly better than what Whit Merrifield was for this team last year. And we were excited about Whit Merrifield. Like, yeah, I'm not saying it works, but I'm saying it's a really, really smart move by the Philadelphia Phillies to try this. And I think that we could see a solid amount of Edmundo Sosa. And then the conversation that opens is, well, then do you bring in an extra infielder as the depth role? Does that make Weston Wilson more likely to get a spot? on the team because he can play infield and outfield. Like, how does that affect all of that? We'll see this all break down, but this is the fascinating mechanics of spring training and trying guys at different positions and the changes you can make without necessarily changing around the roster that much. So things to keep an eye on. Basic storylines as we dive deeper into spring training. We got games coming up this next week. Got a lot of stuff to get into, but that's all for today's episode of Locked On Phillies. Thank you again so much for joining us. We are part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Please make sure you're rating and reviewing if you're listening to this in podcast form. Subscribe to the YouTube channel if you have not done that yet. It really helps us out, and it'll get you notifications when new episodes are posted. And you're going to want to do that because there'll be a lot of news throughout the time of spring training, potentially more roster moves. Who knows what could go on? But yeah, you're going to want to be locked in. We'll have all the information for you here on Locked On Phillies. By the way, tomorrow we are going to do a Mailbag Monday episode. I know I kind of slacked on that. I got distracted by this little thing called the Super Bowl that took up a lot of my time with the Philadelphia Eagles being in it. But back to your regularly scheduled segment. I'll put out a tweet from @ConnorThomas975 on Twitter today at @LO_Phillies, our Locked On Phillies X account. And you can respond with questions for tomorrow's episode that I'll be glad to answer on the Philadelphia Phillies. So a lot of fun stuff to get into this week as spring training has its first full week begin. And we'll talk to you tomorrow on the next episode of Locked On Phillies.